I think we have trouble in our relationship, since that's what these videos are about. I think we struggle in our relationship because we struggle to feel for God. I'm Zach. This is The Average Christian. It's a concept, a project simply about learning what it means to have a relationship with God, and then how do I put this into practical everyday use? How do I live out this relationship? That's a difficult concept because for lots of reasons, because God is not here. I cannot experience God the same way I experience my children or my wife or my friends, my coworkers. And so it becomes a challenge. And one of the challenges is this. I'll tell you to illustrate. There's a movie I watched. I don't know how many years back now. It's been a little while back. Gabe, our youngest, was a lot younger, and I'll never watch it again. Since having kids, I shed tears more often than not. Laura knows when I'm watching YouTube and watching videos of soldiers returning home, because I can't take that. But this one, I've never struggled. And it's not, let me explain this. I've never struggled with being angry with God, but I've also never grieved in ways that many of you have. So I've just never been through certain things, and certain people struggle in certain ways. It's just never one I've gone through of just being mad at God. The closest I ever got was watching this movie, and I think the title of it is just Bully. And I have 4, 5, maybe 6 kids. That's a documentary, of course, and they follow these kids around, and eventually everybody around them gets used to these cameras being around. They follow them over the course of days, weeks, months, and so forth, and they've edited and made a movie out of it. And I think one of these kids reminded me of Gabe, and the child in this movie was pitiful, and the way he got bullied, and what he thought friendship was, and the way his mom and dad reacted to him, because they didn't know any better, because maybe they didn't believe him, the way the school system shoved him aside, and to watch this pitiful, innocent child be treated like that, that's one of the times in my life I cried the hardest and was angry. I don't know if angry with God is the right thing, but I remember praying and wanting God to do something about it, or asking why it had to be like this, why a kid like that had to suffer. So I will probably never, ever see that again. And then I think about this video and about how I feel about God. And you go back and you read verses, and the Bible is so full, not just of information, but just full of things to learn and discover and know. And so you can read and reread, like in Genesis chapter 6 about Noah. And most of us, Noah's old hat, we've heard it since we were kids, if we grew up in church or Christianity in some way. And many of us maybe never go back and recover. And then you come to verse 6, and in the ESV, it says that it grieved God in his heart. And what he's talking about is how humanity had become so corrupt and become so evil that it actually grieved him in his heart. And I think about that innocent child, and then here is the innocent God, who's never done wrong, who's always been good, who's always loved his creation, who a few chapters before is creating just to put us in the middle of it, who is lovingly creating mankind, man and woman, in his own image, in their own image, and is nurturing them. And they break his heart in the garden. And then mankind continues to develop, and you see a lot of genealogy in chapter 5. And then chapter 6, he just looks over everything, and it's just only evil continually. And it grieves him in his heart. And the question I have to ask myself is, do I feel for God? Do I understand that? Do I appreciate that? When you go to Matthew 26 and you see Jesus there in the garden, and beginning in verse 36, Jesus went with him to the place called Gethsemane. He has been looking forward to, doesn't sound right. He has been looking at this day since before he came here, since before the foundation of the world. He knew this was coming. Now he's a human being, fully God and fully human at the same time. Now he's human, and the time has come for him to die. and he knows he's about to be betrayed, and he knows by whom, and he knows his power and all these temptations that he's having to deal with, and the anxiety and the grief, excuse me, the sorrow, possibly anger. And when we see Jesus here in the garden, the place called Gethsemane, he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. He wants them to watch. He wants some time with God, some time in prayer. So he's putting them at watch, taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, that's James and John. He began to be sorrowful and troubled. And we can just read right over that, just like we can read over Genesis 6 and verse 6 about God being grieved to his heart and how he feels. Can I think about how Jesus felt here? My soul is very sorrowful, he says to them, even to death. Remain here, watch with me. And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. This is the same Jesus who knows that it is not possible, not within the plan that they've arranged, that they've come up with, that he's been a part of. But this is his human side and his agony and his sorrow and having to face death, certain death, and he knows how it's going to happen. So he prays like this, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, so you could not watch with me 1 hour? And he continues on from there. And to look at that and to see these disciples who don't understand, but how they are not in tune with Jesus and what he's going through, and he's alone. I mean, alone like maybe no one has ever faced on earth, knowing all that he knows. You see verses in Ephesians chapter 4 where it tells us not to grieve the Holy Spirit of God, the one that's been given to us as a seal of redemption. And then I have to put that in personal terms. Now, how would, and we understand, even those of us as human beings who don't believe, who are atheists or skeptics or agnostics or whatever, we generally know what's a good way to treat a person. What's a good husband, a good wife, a good father, a good mother, a good neighbor, coworker, friend, whatever you want to put in there. We understand that. And we generally, if we have any kind of heart whatsoever, we don't want to hurt anyone. And we don't want to cause anyone any pain. So do I equate that in my relationship with God? And, how does God feel? The Lord's Supper is an interesting concept. It's something that we share in. It's called the communion, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. It's something that was instituted by Jesus himself and tells us to remember him by doing this. And Paul mentions in 1 Corinthians 11 what should be on our minds, which is literally the death of Jesus. And just for many times, moments, sometimes minutes, but for a short, brief period, we think just about his death. And what does it say how does God feel if I can't concentrate for that little bit? How does God feel if I'm worshiping him in music and song and I'm just barely giving anything? Or if I don't bother to show up? What if I gave my one of my kids away to die for somebody else so that somebody else could live, and we had a memorial for that child, and someone showed up and goofed off or didn't even bother to show up? What if I don't pray to God? What if I don't talk to him? I forget about him. I forget, it's just that I forget to just talk to him. How would my wife feel, or my kids? How would your friends feel? And would they call you friend? And I wonder if we just stop and think about how God feels. People, we talk about judgment. It will be a horrible day. There's an old gospel song about a sad day coming, a great day coming. I think the other one's a bright day coming. It's not in that order. You think about the sad day coming, and you think about what judgment's going to be like for God. Have you ever thought about that? God is going to have to, because of his justice, is going to have to send people in the direction that they've chosen, which was not him, and send people to an actual eternal hell. Can you imagine how that's going to feel for him? And that's my only challenge for this whole video. Do you think about how God feels when you ignore him? He's written this book for you, with you in mind. As hard as that is to believe, this is your love letter from God. And if you don't read that and you just ignore that, what's that say to him? How does that make him feel? If I'm not thoughtful about how I live, and I know that God so loved the entire world, as much as you feel badly about what may be going on in our society and what is going on in our society and other places and so forth, imagine God with a knowledge of everything, an intimate knowledge of everything that goes on in the world and how this affects him. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to reciprocate that love. I want to appreciate that love. And I want to constantly think about how he feels, how my sins affect him, what kind of joy I can bring him, and make that the goal of my everyday life in my relationship, to wake up and say, how can I make you happy today? What can I do to bring you joy and not cause you any more misery than what you have to endure? And so hopefully that will help you in this relationship. You hear people talk about not feeling God. Think about how he feels, and maybe it becomes more real and helps you out. And go back and read and see. I've left so much out here, but at least those few references can help you get into the mind, the heart, and the feelings of the God we serve, maybe to make it that much more real. I want to thank you for being with us today. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already subscribed, you can hit this button below. Keep up with new content releases. If this video helps, please like it. Also, if you want to see what we've recently released or what YouTube recommends, they're over here. For our podcast listeners, we appreciate you being with us. If you would subscribe, rate, and review, this helps get the word out as well. And that's what we're about, is helping other people. So if you think this content, this video will help someone, please consider sharing it.